Like, I believe that there's like bits of truth in every religion, but I think religion as a whole is just set up to divide people.
100% of the proceeds gained from this monetized episode will be donated to sciencesaves.org. Thanks for listening. How would you like me to say that you identify, like atheist, agnostic, religious, Christian, either one of you?
I don't even know anymore.
Just kind of fluid.
Yeah.
Oh, what about you?
Me personally?
Mhm.
I am an atheist, but I'm not one of those atheists whose minds can like never ever be changed. I just have not seen what I need to see in order to not be an atheist, if that makes sense. So like, I know that agnostics a lot of times say they haven't seen enough proof to the antithesis or pro, so they're kind of in the middle. I'm not. I'm very much set in what I think, and that is that God isn't real. But if I were to see the proof I needed in order to think he was real, I wouldn't be too embarrassed to change my mind or anything like that. I would be able to admit that I'd been incorrect, if that makes sense.
Have you ever been religious?
So I grew up like Southern Baptist, basically.
Nice. You're from Arkansas, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Northwest Arkansas. And then I was religious until I was about 25 or 26. I think I was religious until I was 24, questioning at 25, in denial at 26, and then fully made the decision by like 27.
What made you question that?
So a lot of stuff didn't make sense at all. For example, they say things like, if the Bible is ambiguous about something, if it's a very ambiguous verse, they'll say, no, this is what it means, concrete. Like that does mean anti-gay. That does mean this and that. But if the Bible is very specific about something, like women should not preach, you should not eat pork, you should not wear mixed fabrics, they're like, no, that's ambiguous. It means a whole different thing. It's not actually what it says. And so at first I could never figure out, like, how do you know what's an actual rule and how do you know what you get to kind of decide for yourself is true? And then there were just a lot of things just weren't adding up. A lot of stories in the Bible versus what I was being told they meant, a lot of things that I thought maybe the church was making up, because then I would go to other churches and they wouldn't have that same rule. And so you're like, are those people going to hell? Like, why would it be that my aunt is going to hell because she, wasn't baptized at 9 years old, but in her church, I'm going to hell because I don't have the rosary or anything like that. And so then finally, I believed in evolution. I was very much into science. And so I didn't understand why it had to be creation or evolution. It couldn't be, what if God created the original and then they eventually evolved into what they are now since it's been so long? And then I started to learn more about, like, there were other books of the Bible that didn't make it in because there was a vote and just things like that. And then I tried shrooms. And when I was tripping, when you're stoned and you're tripping and you write down questions, you're like, these are the greatest questions ever. And then the next day you're like, these are the stupidest questions I've ever seen in my life. But when I was tripping on shrooms, when I woke up the next day, they were still really good questions. And they were questions I think had always been there. But because I was so devout, I had been kind of like pushing them down because I didn't want to admit to myself that everything I'd been doing for 20 years might be for nothing, for no reason at all. And I didn't want to admit to myself that maybe when they say you're going to see everybody you love after this is all over, when you say you're going to go to heaven and see, like my dad's passed away and everybody would say, like, he's watching you, he's so proud of you. Maybe he's not. And maybe he hasn't been. Maybe he died 30 years ago. And that's where it ended. And so now I'm much more comfortable with those ideas. A lot of people think it's like depressing to think that there's nothing afterward. I like that. I enjoy the idea that there's nothing afterward. I think that a lot of people think that nothing afterward means you are in like a black room forever and you're just like existing in this abyss because they can't wrap their mind around literal nothing, just lights out. And then I was put under anesthesia once, and the absolute complete lights out, cease to exist feeling that I had when I came under anesthesia made me so much more comfortable with the idea of death, because I didn't experience anything. I experienced nothing. I was out and then I was back, and it was 8 hours later. So just like a combination of things, like questions that I had, and moving away from that area and having more people in my life that were atheists that I could ask questions and I could talk to about it, and finding out that it doesn't make you a bad person if you don't believe in God or if you have questions, because in the church I was raised in, they warn you, if you start to question God, that's because that's the devil making you question God. So of course, when you're 23, 24, you're like, this doesn't make any sense. You think to yourself, oh my God, this is what they were talking about. This is the devil getting in. I can't let him in, block him out. Instead of, maybe I should look this up. Maybe I should research this. Maybe I should do some homework and come to my own conclusions.
What about you, Jake?
For me, I kind of just I'm I guess omniist is the word. I believe that there's bits of truth in every religion, but I think religion as a whole is just set up to divide people. So if you say I'm this person, it makes you against that person. And so yeah, I think there are basic principles, I grew up Christian. That's how my parents brought me up. And so obviously simple principles like love your neighbor and stuff like that. Those are things that I take away from there. I also I think I believe in reincarnation a little bit. I'm kind of just in the stage where I'm just I kind of believe, stuff, but I'm trying to really figure it out. And that's where I stand. I'm just kind of like an omniist. I think there are bits and pieces of truth in everything. And even science, because I think that, when people tell me that, because I do believe that there is a divine being, God, whatever you want to call it, energy, I don't know. Whenever somebody tries to, say science, or, people do combat it with, none of this shit could it could be possible that none of this shit exists. I'm like, well, if you want to look at it from a scientific principle, energy can never be created nor destroyed. So energy just exists, right? So when you die, your energy's got to go somewhere, right? So that's kind of where I look at reincarnation as a possibility. But at the end of the day, I don't know what's right. Nobody knows what's right. We're all just guessing. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah. And I think there's a huge distinction between I believe this and I'm correct about this. Yes. I think that's I believe very staunchly that I'm an atheist, but at the same time that I don't think that I'm right. I don't think that I'm the correct person. But when you talk about belief, and belief being what do you personally truly believe, that's what I believe as adamantly as some people believe the Bible, if that makes sense.
Right.
And then what about you, Felix?
I believe we are God. If you've ever done psychedelics, you'll get that feeling once you peak. And I'm not saying that I have, for anybody that knows me personally watching this, but I've heard people get this experience where everything is everything is whole, everything connects to one being. And depending on who has a particular set of power, that will determine who's God in our society.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
For one, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
At a point of time, for example, I believe wheat domesticated humans. And in order to get everybody to believe in this one ideology, you had to create a God. You had to give God the ability to own property, own text. You had to give people a way to trade. And God was the perfect scapegoat for that. Even in today's world, people justify imperialistic actions under the name of God. And when I was 14, I was like, if there's over 200 different religions in the world, how do I know that me being a Southern Baptist from this small fucking town in Mississippi is the right thing?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I think that's, one thing I've noticed when I've been interviewing people on this podcast is that many religions have a lot of the exact same rules, thoughts. Like even the Aztecs believed that their god was born from a virgin, like even down to the Aztecs. And so I'm under the idea that even if there is a God, even if there is a heaven, even if there is a series of things we have to abide by, whether they're rules, whether it's steps to get there, I don't think that any of the modern religions are the way to get there. I think they all pulled their favorite parts out of whatever the original religion, the correct one was that existed all the way back when the Bible is based. And that would be the right one. And all of us would still be screwed if the rules are correct and we had to have followed those rules. So even if that is the case and there is a God, none of us necessarily qualify for what the rules are. Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that we're all God, because a guest I had in the past, he wrote a book called Why We Believe in Gods. Highly recommend it. Super short, but fantastic read. And he talks about how the human brain over time and over evolution has actually built itself in order to adhere and make it easier to believe in a God, and how that belief has actually helped human beings survive over thousands of years, because humans are the only creatures that can place a thought, emotion, or a feeling on somebody who's not in front of them. Like you can say, oh, when my mom gets this grade, she's going to kill me, or my dad would love this sweater, or whatever. Even though they're not standing in front of you saying that, we're the only creatures that can, or at least mammals, that can say with accuracy what that person would think or feel or do, or how their face would look if they reacted to something when they're not standing there. And that ability is what helped us develop God and the belief in God, because we don't see him, we don't hear him, literally, most people. And so we are able to say, God wouldn't want me to do that. This would displease God. God would love it if we did this. This would make God happy, because we're so used to that ability to apply that feeling to somebody who isn't there. And that has actually helped us survive in order to, build our cities and formulate familial bonds with other people and survive and to trade and to exist, because we think we are doing what God wants, when really what we're doing is just helping each other survive as a tribe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now it's more centralized to, and maybe this is just me being like cynical or paranoid, but I've always felt like there was a set of people who controlled that narrative. And if they could perpetuate that narrative and cycle it in the world, everything will be for their gain.
That narrative as in the God narrative or the scientific?
So if I'm a pope and I want people to agree with me, and when I cross over into another country, I want to colonize them and get them to agree by the same set of rules, it's easier if I create this intersubjective reality to get people to like kind of connect under something they don't know about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you really are religious, especially in Christianity, if somebody tells you like, I spoke to God and he said these things to me, you're not supposed to say, you sure about that? You sure? You positive? Which again makes it very difficult, because the entire basis of especially Christianity is belief without evidence. Like that's their whole thing, right? And so if you truly believe somebody, you believe somebody. If you ask for evidence, you're no longer believing, and you're kind of edging on disbelief or straying from the belief in some denominations. But so Jake, I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you started your YouTube channel, The Human Experience. What started that, and where did that come from?
Yeah, so I guess it really started when I started focusing on like self-improvement or whatever. And there were like a lot of things that I realized about myself. They were not my ideas. They were, other people's ideas. And a lot of it was growing up, it felt like a lot of things were spiritually bypassed. So like, if I would ask a family member for like advice about something, it was like, oh, give it to God and, all your problems will be resolved, which I loved what you said about scapegoat, like using God as a scapegoat, because I feel like that is like a lot of what my family did growing up. But yeah, it was like, I kind of realized for myself, like, no, like sometimes you got to realize that like you have to put in the work to make things happen and change things for yourself. And it's not gonna all go away. Like if I ask God for $1 million tomorrow, like that's not gonna happen. You know what I mean? Like that's like writing a wish list to Santa Claus. Like you got to go out there and you got to make it happen. You know what I mean? That's so like, yeah, the human experience is, I kind of wanted to hone in on, like, I do like touching on spirituality and talking about that, but like I did want to hone in on like, you know, you can't use God as a bailout. You know, you can't be like, you know, if I just give this all to God, he's going to take it all away. Like all my problems, I'm just going to give it to God. Like, no, like some people out there like have really like serious mental stuff that they got to deal with. And instead of like going to therapy or like reading self-help books or, you know, watching films or something to help them out, whatever you got to do, instead of doing that, they're, you know, like self-medicating with alcohol and drugs and, you
Or
know,
God.
self-destructing. You said what? Or God. Yeah. Or God, honestly, like, or just, you know, saying, I'm just going to give all my problems to God and everything's going to go away. Like, no, that's not how we better our society. We're not going to better our society by using scapegoats.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and then there's the argument, God gave us therapists so you would use them. So use them, you know,
Right.
even if you still want to believe in God, it's like that old parable where the man is like dying on the side of the road and somebody stops to give him water and they're like, would you like some water? He's like, no, God will care for me. So they leave. Second man comes, would you like some water? No, God will care for me. Okay. He dies. He goes to heaven. He's like, God, I thought you cared for me. And God said, I sent you 2 people with water. Like what? That was me caring for you. Right. So I agree. I think a lot of people say, you know, give it to God. And if they truly believed in God, maybe they would recognize that the resources they have in which to handle their problems, whether it's family members, like medical, mental resources, maybe improving their life on their own, you know, diet, exercise, those are all resources they could have potentially been given by God. So that's not even an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
100%. And then Felix, I noticed on your channel, there's kind of been like an evolution, no pun intended. There's just kind of been like an evolution of, in the beginning, it seemed like a lot of your content was based on loneliness and kind of like the idea of loneliness and isolation. And then as you've gotten more recent, it's almost been like using that loneliness and that isolation as like a power move, as like a tool, instead of like your first videos weren't like, poor me, I'm lonely, but they were very like, this is what loneliness looks like. This is what it feels like. These are different types of loneliness. And then your most recent ones almost seem more like empowering, or they seem kind of like, sure, I don't get along with a lot of people. I don't have a lot of people, but here's how I'm going to elevate myself. Do you think that loneliness comes with or do you think it has anything to do at all with your stance on the existence of God? Do you feel like there is no God and you're lonely? Do you feel like that has nothing to do with it? Which came first?
If God did exist and I truly believed in God in a state that I am now, and when I was making those style of videos, I would still think I was lonely, because I'm like you, if I can't see him, he's not physically there. If I can't just experience him in a tangible sense, like I can experience like something with another human, he's not there. As a matter of fact, I would look at it and be like, what a fucking asshole to not show up out of all these times when I do need you. And yeah, I would say my videos are more empowering now. Before they were like literally me just turning on my camera whenever I had something to say, but I didn't feel comfortable talking about it with people in my life. So that, and just being more comfortable on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember during the video you guys had together, you even mentioned, you're like, you know, you will try and say something to people, you know, about being lonely. And the first thing they'll say to you is like, you've got a girlfriend, you've got a job, like you've got this, you've got that, instead of being like, that's interesting, you have all these things and you're still lonely, tell me about it. Instead, they're like, no, you can't be lonely because this. And do you think that reaction from people continues that whole, you know, this is why I don't have many people around me situation, because they react this way? Or that's just like a a negative reaction you've gotten a lot.
Once you like realize that everything, like in a capitalistic society, extrinsic value is the thing. So anything that you tie to yourself to make yourself seem like you're a part of the herd, it's like once you recognize that, it's like there's no point in even interacting with people who just don't see it.
Mhm.
But it's a double-edged sword because you'll fuck around and get to the point where, and I hope I can curse in your videos.
Yeah, you're good.
You'll
Yeah.
mess up and get to the point where like you've isolated yourself so much that there's like no going back, like both mentally and physically, contact wise and all that. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I would say that. So what, and that was before lockdown and all that even?
Before lockdown, kinda, because I had deleted social media like all of my shit before COVID started. And that's when I realized, like, through like just not being able to get on my phone and escape, it was like, oh fuck, I'm really just here by myself. Like no thoughts I hear except mine.
Yeah. And sometimes that's a good thing. And sometimes that can be kind of scary, depending on what you're thinking about. And have you always been non-religious? Did you grow up religious? Like at what point did you start to really focus on and think about your thoughts on the matter?
My mom was Catholic because she's from New Orleans. And then she transitioned to being non-denominational, I think they call it. And I just remember going to like Baptist church one Sunday, and I would go to a Catholic church another Sunday, go to a Protestant church another Sunday. It was just like, what are we doing here? Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I had a very similar experience. My mom even called us religion whores when I was a kid. And I didn't know you couldn't say that word. And so like people would say, what church do you go to? And I would say like, my mom calls us religion whores. I didn't know like whore was a bad word. So I've never told her that though. And then Jake, what was your experience like growing up in terms of going to church, not going to church?
Yeah, it was we went to quite a few churches. We kind of bounced around. And we had found one when I was like between the ages of like 13 and 16 that we were going to pretty consistently. And it felt good in the sense of like our whole family was going, like even my aunts and uncles and like our neighbors were going to this church together, so it was cool in terms of like, like knowing people. But at the same time, that's a double-edged sword because like it was almost like a lot of nepotism going on in the church, and a lot of like, people, there would be like plays or something, or like the choir would be singing certain songs and they would, give certain people the lead of the song or the lead in the play, and other people were wondering like, where's my child's, opportunity to be involved in this and do that, this and that. And it kind of became like, we started noticing it was like really toxic, honestly.
Yeah.
And like there was somebody that was referring to the church as like, that's my dad's church, and like kids were like getting in debates over like, this is like so and so's dad's church, and it's like, what, and just recently, like somebody from that church that was actually a childhood friend of mine, he actually passed away because he, there was drug addiction there. And, obviously I'm not going to, say names or anything out of respect to the family, but it's like, and that could be like a very deeply rooted aspect of it. They were like putting their kids in this environment and just very harsh with and strict with their beliefs. And
did you ever feel like when you, I'm sorry to cut you off, but
no,
when
you're
you're in
good,
church and the guy was doing his sermon, did you ever feel like it was a sales pitch?
a little bit, yeah. Like, I mean, like I said, there are certain things that I did take away, and I do, hold with me just as like in terms of my character, I guess. But like in terms of like, like gay people are, I don't know, like I don't like the idea that like there are certain groups of people that we aren't supposed to fuck with, we're not supposed to mess with, you know what I'm saying? Like I truly believe that like in a perfect world, bro, like obviously nothing's perfect, but in a perfect world, like everybody would just, be cool. And like, that's kind of how I try to operate. I try to navigate. I just try to be cool with everybody.
Do you think religion fits in that perfect world?
No. And that's the thing. Like, I'm not religious. You know what I mean? Like I have my beliefs that I take away from religions, but I myself am not religious.
Yeah.
And even with, atheism, I agree. You know what I mean? Because like, you do not have proof. Like, there is no proof. It is literally like people take ideas that they believe and fix that into their ego and make that their identity and make people feel like, like that is the way, that is the right way. And like, nobody knows. That's what I'm getting at. We're all just guessing. And what I believe, it does not, I don't think any less of you if you believe otherwise. You know what I mean? Like, that's your belief. I got my belief,
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think one thing I really like about what you said is that we're all just guessing, and I feel the exact same way, right? Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of times when you tell somebody like I'm an atheist, they think that you think you're correct about everything, which isn't the case. But if I'm going to guess, I'm going to pick the guess that harms the least amount of people mentally, physically, emotionally, right? Like, you could be guessing about most forms of Christianity, and you're still guessing that you need to tell gay people what they're doing is wrong. And you're guessing that if you have sex before marriage, you're going to hell. And you're guessing.
I'm sorry.
No. I didn't mean you.
I don't believe in hell, because for me personally, as a human, I asked my dad this because my dad believes in hell. And I asked him, I was like, so say me, I have 2 older sisters. I said, say me and my 2 sisters, you're put in a position of power to choose the one of us who had the worst life, in your opinion, who disobeyed the most. And you have to send them into a fiery pit for eternity, and they cannot get out. You can't help them. They just burn for the rest of their lives. I asked him, could you do that? And he said, I don't think I could do that. And he told me, but God is different. And, God has wrath. And, if that's your belief, that's fine. You know what I mean? You're entitled to your belief. But what I believe is that if there is a divine being that is so much more powerful and intelligent than I am, they would be able to understand that that is messed up. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And they would not send somebody for eternity to burn. I just don't believe that. You know what I mean?
Right. Especially if it's the biblical God who is omnipotent and omniscient. He knows what you're going to do before you do it, and he still makes you do it. He still doesn't give you the opportunity, because they say it's about free will, but it's really not. If he knows exactly what you're going to do before you do it, that doesn't sound like free will, right? So He knows you're going to sin. He already knows how bad that sin is going to be. He lets you do it without saying anything, and then he sends you to hell for doing what he could have stopped you from doing. Doesn't make any sense, right? And I tell people all the time, like, it's not that I don't believe, like, I don't believe there's a God, but if I got to heaven and there was a God and I'm at the gates and I'm being judged, right? I would hope that God would at least hear me out a little bit, right? Would at least have some reason and hear me say, look, I asked you to show up and you didn't. I asked you to talk to me and you didn't. You killed my dad, bro. Like, you took, like, at least I would hope that whoever God is, whatever the deity is, if there was one at the end, he would at least look at my file and be like, okay, you were a nice person. You did a lot of nice things. You didn't do anything shitty. You didn't, like, with the exception of that podcast where you talked about how I'm probably not real all the time. Like, but I would hope that there would be any opportunity to get reason. But if we go by the biblical God, that's not who he is. That's just not, and that's not me trying to tell Christians like, gotcha. It's literally just me reading the textbook. It's me saying, if you call yourself a fundamentalist, which means you believe the fundamentals of the Bible are the correct way to read the Bible, then you also believe that this vengeful God is the real God. And that's terrifying. And if we're all just guessing, I'm not going to guess that one. I'm going to guess the one where he's not there, Now, as a parent, do you ever worry? Does it like make you think any more about the idea of like salvation or the afterlife anymore now that you've brought like a life into the world, or do you pretty much feel the same way anyway?
I don't really worry about the afterlife, because I even like have taken into consideration it could be, Egyptian principles were that you end up wherever you believe you'll end up. You know what I mean? So everybody's heaven could be different if heaven is even real. You know what I mean? So I'm not worried. I really found it pretty irritating and agitating when my parents would say things like, we're concerned about your, spiritual journey or where you're going to end up and stuff like that. I'm more concerned about my kid just being a decent fucking human being, truthfully, in a world where people are incredibly shitty humans, increasing. I've noticed, and that doesn't mean that like I'm gonna stoop to their level. Like, and that's what I hope for my kids. I hope that my kids aren't going to, see something that's, a shitty person, and they're gonna also in turn become that way as well. So more than anything, I'm just trying to raise like good people, and that's it. And I truly believe that if you're a good person, if you're you're doing the best that you can, the rest will work itself out. Whatever you believe will happen after this, everything will be, just be a good person. That's it.
Right. And that's another thing, is a lot of people think that if you don't believe in God, that means you don't believe in like the 10 commandments. And I tell people all the time that those are just really good advice. Like, the Bible didn't invent don't kill people. The Bible didn't invent, honor your parents. Like, they didn't invent those rules. That's just decent advice. And I would argue that the honor thy father and thy mother only applies if your father and your mother deserve honor. Like, just because you're really right. Like, I know a lot of fathers and mothers that don't deserve no fucking honor at all. Like, anyway, not my parents though. My parents are great.
I agree. Yeah.
In case my mom listens to this one episode.
Like, I was just telling my wife this not too long ago. I hate respect your elders. I hate that rule, because that gives so many elders the idea that like they can speak to you however they want to, and you just got to take it, and you just got to be respectful back. And I absolutely despise that principle.
Right. Especially, I feel like the elders in this country very recently, not all of them. I know that I have
not all of them.
A lot of ages listen to this podcast, but the loud majority, the loud majority of people that I am displeased with at the moment in this country oftentimes are older people who just want everybody to do everything the same way they've always done it and to follow the rules, and yet make the rules even harder for us to follow than it ever was for them.
Like, exactly. Changed. You know what I mean? Times have changed.
Yeah. And then Felix, is your family still religious? Do you ever talk to them about your current feelings, or how has that ever come up?
Yeah, they're still religious. I don't think that's changing anytime soon. Like, after a certain age, I just believe you instill yourself with those concepts and it never goes away. But I don't let it affect my relationship with them. They kind of already sense that there's like this thing they can't figure out about me, their friend, their son, whoever is related to me. And we both just live with that. Like, people in your family, to both of y'all, like, they probably think, like, do people ever tell you they can't really figure you out or read you?
Not in those words, but I'm definitely that, I think, person in my immediate family that's very perplexing.
Like, how so?
Misunderstood.
Well, like, I've got half a shaved head, I was the lib before like being lib was cool, or like before there was like a word for it. I've always just kind of done whatever I wanted to do. Shave my head, go on a roller coaster, take a trip to a different country by myself. I moved here to Nashville with like no warning whatsoever. I told them I was like taking a weekend to visit a friend in Nashville. And then I was like, oh, by the way, I signed a lease. I'm moving there. I'm very much one of those, like, I've never, when I was in high school, like, all of my friends were, oh, we're going to get married, we're going to get engaged, we're this, we're that, trying to be like the whole, millennial trad wife type situation. And that just wasn't me. Let me clarify. I am not one of those not like other girls. That's not at all my brand.
Conservative?
When I was younger, I thought I was conservative.
No, your friends.
Oh, my friends. When we were all younger, we thought we were conservative. Like, when we were in high school, because our parents were conservative, we were therefore conservative. Like, I thought I was a Republican conservative until I tried shrooms. Like, I truly thought I was a Christian Republican conservative. Like, I thought that was my whole brand, but I was still always one of the more liberal conservative people. Like I always just did things a little bit different than people. Like I've been doing stand-up since I was in 11th grade. And I remember like one of my friend's parents offered me money to like not pursue comedy because they were so worried I was going to like fail and be homeless. And now I've been doing it for like 15 years. That he literally like offered me a job. He's like, I love you. I think you're talented and I care about you so much. Please don't do this. Don't go that way. Yeah, artsy fartsy is what Southerners would call it, I think. But so I think to that degree, my family, they've always known I would be taking a different path. They just never quite know what path it's going to be, right? Like I showed up with a parrot and they found out like when I had him, just that sort of thing. So they're used to it, but they still never, I don't think they can predict what move I would make. They just know which ones I'm not going to take at that point. Yeah. And Jake, what about you?
Oh yeah, for me, yeah, I think like growing up, I was very like I was a big people pleaser growing up, and like I didn't like to step on people's toes, and so like for the longest time, I had a very predictable pattern of living, very quiet, and like I just didn't want to disrupt the peace. But like I had so much built up in here.
Were you Christian around that time?
Yeah. So I was identifying as non-denominational Christian, and yeah, I just had a lot of beliefs that like weren't actually mine. They were just kind of like, this is how it is. This is what you got to do. And like, you better not stray away from that, kind of is how it felt to me. And yeah, I guess now that I'm getting older though, and I'm establishing my own opinions and my own thoughts and beliefs, yeah, I think my parents are, and just my family in general is a little like, they don't really understand. Like they obviously still care for me and we still keep in contact and everything. But yeah, I don't really think they understand a lot of things. But yeah, like, because when I got my dreads and stuff, like my family has always been very like, cut your hair short, and that was like the standard in my family. It's like cut, like shortcut, and if you want to put the wave cap on and get your 360s going, get the waves going, that like do that. But that's about as far
as it goes
in the family, bro. That's as far as you could go. So I got older and I was like, no, dreads are dope.
Bro, you couldn't even have a ball fade with like an afro on the top?
I don't know, man. I probably could have. About as crazy as about as wild as it got for me is I had a box fade in like sophomore year or something like that. I convinced my dad to let me get a box fade or something like that. But outside of that, man, it was pretty standard. Like, and anytime my hair would get like a little bit too long, my mom would be like, it's time for a haircut. And I'd go get my haircut. And like, I never, was able to make my own choices, like regarding my appearance. So as I got older, I was like, no, I'm getting dreads. No, I'm getting a tattoo. Like, yeah, it's stuff like that. Like where I don't think my family like gets it, because a lot of stuff is like taboo to society. Like, like dreads get a bad rep in society, and like if you have a visible tattoo for some reason, that's like shame on you, like at least the older people. So
I asked both of you that because I believe most monotheistic religions make people in a sense docile. So like they're very just like, they're like robots. They live under this one thing and
they fall in line.
Yeah. And once you like start to find yourself, like you said, I think you appear to be less docile. So people are like, oh, we can't control him. And as long as you don't become the antagonist, it's okay. And that separates you. It makes everything cordial. But
yeah. And when you rock the boat, you become one of two people. And some people view you some people are both of these. They look at you both ways. You either become like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing that. That's not how it's supposed to be done. That's not how we've always done it. Or I'm going to watch really close and see what happens. And if it works for them, I'm going to say, yay, we always knew it. And if it doesn't work for them, I'm going to say, see, this is what happens.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people either pick one side or they're a little bit of both. They're like, I'm going to watch you from afar. I'm going to be like, for shame. But then when something good happens for you, I'm going to pretend like I've always been there.
And when you say works for you, like you're talking about the result of getting those extrinsic values attached to your life.
Yeah. So like maybe
supporters and
right, exactly. Like
money.
money. So like when I shaved my head, everybody was like, oh, that looks so cool. Like we thought it was going to look horrible. Right. So like they thought it was dope that I shaved my head. Or like when I moved to Chicago and I started doing comedy, I know there were a lot of people who used me as an example of like how not to act like a grown up. Right. But then when it actually started like working out for me, they were like, oh, how great for you. We told your mom, we always knew you could do it, small town stuff like that. And like the same people that were like, please take this job, don't do this, you're going to ruin your life. We're like, oh, we always knew you could do it. And I'm like, you literally tried to give me an out. What are you talking about? Just stuff like that, where, even if what I'm surprised by is in conservative communities like that, even the smallest things can be shocking. Like I took a trip by myself and people asked my mom, I was an adult, full grown adult, like almost 30 years old. And people asked my mom like how she could let me do that. And it's just a trip. I'm not going to, a third world country where they're afraid I'm going to get trafficked. Literally, it's just like, oh my gosh, how could you let her do that? And my mom's like, well, first of all, she's an adult. Second of all, it's her money. Like, how could I not let her do that? Like, what are you talking about? Kidnapping her? And then you go to the trip and you come back and those same people are like, oh, let me see the pictures. Even something as simple as that. When I was a kid, I did a lot of stuff for shock value, like I did because I was trying to figure out who I was. I also had undiagnosed ADHD. Now I'm on medication. It's fine. So I did the shock value stuff. I was like the loud kid trying to be funny all the time. I was the one that dressed like quirky to get attention all the time. But again, not like in a not like other girls sort of brand situation, just like in an explorative type way. And it's so interesting to see that you don't even have to go that far. You don't have to shave your head and draw on your eyebrows to be weird to people who want you to stay the same way. Like I'm 31 and I'm not married. And to some people, now that they know me, they think they're fine with it. But to some people, that's like shocking. That's like, is she gay? Like what?
To people you first meet.
Yeah. Or to people who have known me my whole life, they thought for sure like, oh, she'll get married when she's like before college. Oh, she's going to college. Oh, she'll meet a boy and she'll get married after college. Oh, she didn't. Oh, she'll get married before she's moving to Chicago. Like, oh, she'll get married before then. She'll marry somebody then. And you're just like, it's okay. Like, it's all right. It's fine.
Terrible. I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, but what like terrible, like way to live, like to pressure people into that. Like I've talked to a lot of people about that, like who think, I shouldn't say a lot. I've talked to a few people who think similarly to me. And like, it's so awful that like, mainly the older generation was always like, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? Like those are such big foundations that you're building in your life to just be like, you have to do this to be normal.
Right. But like, think of it this way though. Think of it this way. I used to think that way. I used to be like, stop trying to cut my wings, stop trying to change who I am. But at around the age of 30, I started to realize they mean no harm. They truly believe that you are messing up your life. When I was younger, I thought like, oh, they just want to keep me in a cage. Like I'm not in a cage. But as I get older, I'm like, these people legitimately thought they were saving me by saying like, sweetheart, don't do that. Like, honey, don't do that. Like, don't do that. They genuinely were. It came from a place of like love and concern, like, and it took me 30 years to figure that out. And I do regret the way that I responded to people back when I thought like haters are going to hate, this and that and the other. Now that to say, say, for example, 50 people treat you that way. There's about 10 that genuinely want you to fail. There's about 10 that are just shitty people. They don't like change. They did something too early, or they gave up an opportunity, or they married the first person they ever met, or whatever. They made some decision they regret, and they can't stand to see you happy, and they want to see you make the same mistake they made. So they're going to make you feel like an idiot for not doing it. There are those people. But when you reframe it like, oh, it's actually sad because these people legitimately believe that all there is in life is what they got. And the more that you do that's outside of any opportunities they've ever had, it scares them for you. if that makes sense.
So do you think it's a God problem or more so
It's a church problem.
okay.
I think religion and I think church is a problem.
So would you consider yourself an individualist?
I
You said you're a
think
liberal.
I think that, so I would say that, but I think that everyone is. I think everyone is. I think even conservative people are. Because when you really break it down, and I'm talking like far right conservative, like let's take it as far right as we can possibly go. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, everything that they think and believe and they do is for number one, is for the individual. And for more liberal people, we say we want everyone to have free healthcare. And then you say, well, why? And a lot of times somebody like myself, very liberal, will say, well, I just know that if I got cancer, I wouldn't want, it still boils down to an I, even though at the end of the day, we want those same things for everybody. You know, like I want free healthcare. I want like cheaper school. I want, you know, these certain things. I want, you know, better funding for single mothers. At the end of the day, it comes down to either how they would feel if they did it, somebody they know that they cared about that happened to. It's still an individual. And then if you talk to somebody who's like super duper conservative and you say, what's wrong with debt relief? They say, well, when I went to school, I had to pay. Or what's wrong with free medical care? Well, when I had this, it's still an individual thing. So I think while I am an individualist, I don't think that makes me any different from anybody else who has a strong opinion of any sort, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself an individualist?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And
I
you,
think,
Jake?
yeah. And I think oh, Jake, continue. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I think individualism isn't a bad thing as long as what you're doing to help the individual is also good for everybody else. Like
Absolutely.
you're not harming anybody by being individual, but continue.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I like what you said. I think we all are. I think so much of what we do, to touch on what Felix said, has to do with extrinsic factors. So like we all want to operate as individuals, but within, you know, reason, within like what's going on outside of me, though. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I feel like it would be like, I don't know if it would be dangerous, because so many people think it'd be dangerous for like it sounds crazy, but anarchy, like like everybody just literally just everybody being individuals and everybody just being accepting. And I think that's so much of what we limit ourselves to is principles that are outdated. And if we created new principles instead of just continuously repeating the cycle of patterns that aren't working.
But for us to create the new principle, what do we have to create?
Right.
Yeah.
Before creation has to be destruction, right?
More so,
is that
there
where
has
you're
to
going
be
with it, or
no. So if you
okay,
create
we're
something
going
else,
two different.
if
You
you
said
if you create something else, you're essentially creating God, but in a
Okay.
separate domain.
Okay.
And that's why I asked that. It's like at a certain point, if you really think about it, people are so afraid to just say that they want to be God. I mean, Nietzsche said God is dead a long time ago, but I think if you translate it to modern times, it could say we are the new gods because we create these rules for ourselves. We deem that everything we want for ourselves is for us, even if it affects somebody in a positive or negative way, we're still creating it. We're still using free will as an example to say like, okay, this is okay for what I want to do. And if what I want to do is the new world order, I'm essentially creating God from within myself. But so many people are just scared to say that. So they hide behind like Christianity, whatever it may be. And they, in a narcissistic type of form, shame you for not believing in the same ideal that's keeping them in this like coddled form.
Yeah. I also think people are afraid when they are approached with, say, for example, they want things to be a certain way. When they're approached with the opportunity to make it that way, they kind of freak out. because one thing that religious people are used to is they're used to being told what to do all the time.
Yeah.
And they're used to being told what the rules are. And I've heard a lot of religious people say, like, man, I would do that, but I'm a Christian. Like, I would do that, but, you know, God's watching. And when you're like, hey, what if I told you you can just do that? You can just go to that place. You can just try that thing. And there's nobody who's going to get mad at you for it. Suddenly, they have this opportunity to explore those side of themselves that they've been told up until now, against the rules, wrong, don't do it. And I don't even mean like extreme ones. I don't even mean like sexuality. I literally just mean like there's a lot of things that people don't partake in because they think somebody's watching. And the idea that nobody's watching and they can just do whatever they want freaks them out, because one, they're used to being told. They don't know how to operate on their own.
There has to be a part of people that just really know that like nothing is there after death. And
But
if I'm afraid
freaks
of
them
dying,
out.
yeah, it
Freaks them
does.
out.
If I'm because they're scared of dying though. They
Right.
literally are terrified of passing away. So they give it
Right.
meaning.
Right. And if you'll notice, if you talk to people about death, this is one of the most fascinating parts of talking to people about death. And I know it sounds weird to be excited to talk about it, but when you're not afraid of it, it's a lot easier to talk about. I was just having this conversation last night. I was like, what do you think like about the idea that there's nothing? And everybody says something to the effect of, like, everybody who's religious says something to the effect of, I just can't imagine like endless nothing, blackness forever. And I'm like, no. That's still you being conscious. The human brain literally cannot wrap its mind around not being conscious. So even when it thinks about death, even when it thinks about being dead, deceased, it still pictures itself being conscious in a black room with nothing, a void forever. And that's when I ask people, have you ever been put under anesthesia? The majority of them say no. And I'm like, there is literally nothing. Lights out. Gone. It's not black. It's not hazy. It's not an abyss. You're not thinking like, wow, the inside of my brain looks great. Nothing. You're like, you're gone. Lights out. And you don't feel anything. So like, I don't know how I would feel about, you wouldn't, like, the end. Right. And I think because our brains work so hard when they're wired correctly, which I think gets into like mental illness and things like that. But when your brain is wired correctly, it exists to keep you from ever thinking about dying, because the whole point is that you stay alive, whether you eat, whether you stay safe, whether it's like your natural reactions and instincts. So you can't even think about being dead, because there has never been a moment in your entire existence where you've been nothing. You've been not. Even when you're asleep, most of the time you're looking at the back of your eyelids and you're dreaming in your conscience. But
I heard that's why you wake up when you dream that you're dying. You wake up before anything else happens, because the brain literally can't process what happens after.
Yes. Yeah, it can't even imagine it. It can't even like put on a show to pretend what that is. And so I think when people have been told their whole lives, there is, at the end, you either get the goods or you go to hell. There's either punishment or there's reward. One, it freaks them out because they want to make sure they're living right. Two, everybody intrinsically knows they're not living right. Everybody knows, they know it. And that's why they keep going to church, because they know it. But then when they've been told that none of that's real, I think two things scare people. One, that whole, I literally can't fathom what it's like to be dead. And two, I've wasted 30 years of my life for nothing. It's that whole sunk cost fallacy where they're like, I would literally rather live the rest of my life as a Christian and never think that I wasted the first 20 of them as a Christian than explore what life could be like after this without believing any of that stuff. When I was a Christian, a very devout Christian, I noticed that I didn't actually like a lot of people I went to church with. And like I went to school with a girl whose dad was a pastor, and she would be a total bitch. And then Wednesday she'd be like, come to my dad's church. And you're like, you're a bitch. Like, what do you, I don't want to, no, I'm not going to go to your dad's church, spend more time with you. But when I started to meet atheists, and this will lead me into something I wanted to talk to you guys about your past video. And they were nice and they were kind and they didn't kill people and they didn't commit crimes and they didn't lust after their neighbor's wife. I realized they're just doing it to do it. They don't think they get a reward at the end. And so even though when you go to church, you can get banana bread and casserole and meet really nice people and nice old church ladies, and everybody at the end of the day is doing it for themselves and for that reward. Whereas like atheists or agnostic people or simply non-religious people, I know a lot of people who literally don't care about religion in order to even give themselves a title. They're being kind to be kind, because that's just, and a lot of people argue that you can't have morals without religion. And I've interviewed about 50 people on this podcast that prove that you can be a good moral person and not have religion. It's not, it's not one thing or the other. And something that I thought was very interesting that you guys talked about on the last podcast was you started talking about communicating with people. And I think that is where religious people and non-religious people, where we find like that kind of the communication is lacking. And Jake, you said, and I wrote it down, you said, everybody wants to be heard. Very few people want to listen. You said it's not a conversation with some people, it's a monologue. And then Felix, you said, asking people why helps you connect. And both of those really stuck with me, because I've talked about in a past episode, one of the main reasons I became non-religious is because I had kind, patient people in my life that literally just asked me why. So I'd be like, I'm a Christian. Why? Because the Bible says this and the Bible says that. It's like, okay, have you ever seen that? Well, no. Okay, so like, why do you choose to still believe that? Not confrontational, not, and then they would let me go off. But I caught myself doing a lot of what you talked about, Jake, where I would just go off on this tangent. I would almost make it a tirade because I was prepared to have to argue about it, when really the person just asked me why. Like, they're not arguing. They just want to hear, like, why do you think this? Why is this your perspective? And I'd never been confronted that way. When you're a Christian, it's like, cite John 3:16, you're done. That's the end of the conversation. Like, made it, like, heaven points. But in the real world, it's like, okay, people are allowed to just ask you why. Do you have a good answer for that? And that was one of my favorite parts about your conversation, because I think if conservative people and liberal people, if religious people and non-religious people, if we all spent a lot more time listening instead of talking or asking each other why, and not preparing an argument in our head while the person is speaking and answering the question, I think the communication lapse between those who believe and those who don't would maybe not, like, it wouldn't, like you said earlier, there's no perfect world, but I think we would find that, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Symbiology? Is that a word? Did I combine two words?
Symbiote. I think you did. Yeah.
Yeah. Like symbioticness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I just thought that was super interesting that you guys said that.
Yeah. Is this question for me? I'm sorry.
Sorry. It was more of just like a general respond how you will. Yeah. Not really a question, more of a statement.
Yeah. Like you said, I think it is, I can't tell you like the last like random person, like outside of family, that I've talked to where I can just like kind of like say what I need to say, and then that person says what they need to say. It always kind of just feels like, I say something and then somebody's like offended by it, so they just defense because I like me, just like you guys, like we think kind of like outside of, like, not to be like the I'm different person, you know what I mean? But just like,
funny, you two are saying the same thing.
I'm paranoid about being branded as one of those, like, I'm not like other girls. I hate
it. Why?
I just think that's awful.
I don't like the image that people have about the people that are like, I'm different, you know what I mean? But like, yeah, like, I don't think that traditional things are still relevant to this day, is where I'm coming from. And so, yeah, I feel like I have a lot of conversations with people who, they are traditionalists, and they are very rooted in what they know. And people are very unwilling to receive like new information and just like listen passively. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think there's like so much like, that's such an underappreciated skill, just listening, and so undervalued. And I said this in the podcast with Felix, we have like the average attention span for a human being currently is like 7 seconds. Thank you, Vine. Thank you, TikTok. Like, that's atrocious. You know what I mean? We are not, like, we can never like progress as a civilization if nobody is willing to listen. People have to listen in order to progress and take in new information so changes are made. And if you're just in the box of this is the way, this is the way, this is the way, and anybody else fuck what they have to say. Bars. I'm sorry. Anyway, but
No, you can cuss. That's totally fine.
Yeah, no. Okay. But anyway, yeah, it's like, if you just focus on what you believe and if you think that your ego and your ideas are right, like nothing is going to get better that way.
Right. And you never learn. If you think you're incapable of being incorrect about something, you'll never learn something new.
Right.
Which could be great. It could be wonderful. It could be terrible. We learn things every day. Yeah, absolutely. And then Felix, has anybody ever asked you why to a question that really made you pause and even reflect on something that you thought was something you wanted to live by, whether it was political, personal, religious?
Yeah. My one part of my family is materialistic to the point where it becomes a sense of nihilism on their side. And when I say nihilism, I'm not referring to the act of saying nothing matters, but I think these people use objects and things as a way to make themselves feel important. So one of the questions I've always gotten is, why don't you be more like this person? Why don't you, do something nice for yourself, go out, or why don't you buy this? Why don't you wear this, exist in this type of style? And my answer has always been, I don't know. And when I ask religious people, I'll use my mom, for example, because me and her used to argue a lot about God. I'll be like, why do you believe in God? And to quote, she says, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that tells me everything I need to know. Every time I've questioned somebody about their beliefs or I ask somebody why, it's just the way things are.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really leave an argument to exist in order for me to be like, oh, well, maybe the way I'm living is wrong because it's just low hanging fruit in the first place.
Yeah. Wouldn't you, and I asked this because I've always had like a specific opinion on this. Wouldn't you rather somebody say, I have no idea, than somebody go off on like a diatribe of like, I know this for sure, and this and this and this and this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do you trust people more when they admit they don't know, or do you trust people more when they know exactly what they're talking about?
Both, because the person that thinks they know exactly what they're talking about may truly believe, like you said, that this is like what it is. It's like, who am I to question it? But at the same time, you don't really leave an argument for me to change my ways if your answer is, I don't know. I'm not going to follow you.
Yeah.
So,
no, for sure. Yeah. I've always said like politically and religiously, like in 2016, if I had asked somebody, why did you vote for Trump? And they had just been honest and said, because he wasn't Hillary. Like, I would have had more respect for that person than somebody who was like, well, because when he was caught talking nasty, like, that's just how people talk. And like, instead of trying to pretend like things that I know that they don't actually align with, they align with for the sake of arguing with me. Mm-hmm. I trust so much more as somebody who's like, I'm just going to be real with you because it wasn't the bitch I hate. Right. And the same with Christianity. One of the things you mentioned, you asked me in the beginning, like what made me start to question my faith and stuff like that, is everybody always had an answer for everything. And it was always a long-winded answer. And it always just nailed everything on the head. But at the same time, I was in debate. And one of the things we learn, or at least one of the things I learned, was you can always tell when somebody's lying because they have a long-winded answer for everything. And I don't know if you guys are true crime fans, but anytime they would be like, where were you? And the person's like, I was at Walmart. That person's probably telling the truth. But if they're like, where were you? And they're like, well, first I got out of the car and then I dropped my keys and I had to bend down and pick up my keys. Like, I remember that because it was just so specific. And then I went to the bread aisle and then like they didn't have the bread that I wanted. You're like, this story is a little
unless they have anxiety.
Unless they have anxiety.
Yeah.
Like, I don't trust lie detector tests for that reason. Because man, sometimes you just like, if I had popped an Adderall and then they're like, you want to take a lie detector test? I'm going to be like, fuck no, I'm going to jail. Like,
yeah, you can't even use them in court.
Yeah, you literally, they're like, what's your name? And it's like Sydney, and like the lines are just going off. So that was something I picked up on too. I'm like, so wait, CSI tells me that if you have a long-winded answer and an answer for everything, you're probably lying. When I'm in debate and I'm debating somebody and they have an answer for everything, I can usually pinpoint a lie and I can usually get them on that. But when I'm in church, I'm just like, nobody doesn't know anything. This 25-year-old who leads my youth group has all the answers. That's weird, especially when you're like 21. And now that I'm 30, I'm like, I don't know shit. So I know they didn't know shit. Right.
Mhm.
I forgot where I was going with that.
They're just using a framework that was already there before they were even fucking born. So that's still low hanging fruit. It's like, come up with something original if you want me to like actually believe in it, and let me see it actually work in your life.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'll be convinced.
Yeah. One of the best things I've ever heard was he's a friend of mine, but he's also a pastor, and he was on this podcast. Is I asked him, and he was also on debate. So like I was wondering how he was going to approach the question. I asked him, I said, you grew up in the South, you grew up Baptist, you're a preacher, this is what you believe. How do you know that this is the correct religion? How do you know that Baptist Christianity is the right one, so much so that you're willing to like get in the pulpit and preach about it? And he was like, if I'd been born anywhere else at a different time, I would probably think that was right. And I was like, whoa, really? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I'm aware that I believe what I believe because of where and when I was raised, but that doesn't change the fact that I sincerely believe it. He's like, I truly believe it, and I have seen what I need to see in order to believe it.
Seen what?
Oh, I guess like he has seen a lot of people say that they see God in things, because that's one question I really like to ask like evangelical or fundamentalist people, even though he's not evangelical, is I like to say, when was the last time that you saw God? Like, tell me about a time that you saw God. And a lot of times it's like an emotional moment. It's the birth of their child. It's their spouse surviving a horrible illness they shouldn't have survived. It's a time where they almost died and they made it out. And so it's complicated, because part of you is like, if God was real, wouldn't he have not given your wife cancer? Like, but then the Bible and Christianity tells you so much about, oh, don't worry, God will test you. Like, expect that. God will test you. But like with the patience of Job, you just have to have the patience of Job, and he never gives, what's the word? He never gives too much. There's like a phrase, like he never gives,
or something like that.
And like, I remember when I would ask people, I was like, if God's real, why did he take my dad? Why did he take my dad from me and make my mom like a single mom? What the fuck was that about? They would say, one, God never gives too much to his soldiers that they can't handle. And two, there's a reason and a purpose for everything, which to me, I'm like, fuck you. But so I know that some people say they see God in things like nature, in beauty, in miracles, what they deem to be miracles, in opportunities. Like, I know some people who grew up in very, very rough areas, and they were able to make it out because the church gave them something, whether it was a place to live or a job or a family when they didn't have one.
Thank God. God is good all the time.
It's hard to debate with somebody when, for example, atheists, their whole thing is I need proof. And Christianity, their entire thing, they're upfront about it, they're honest about it, is belief without proof. So how do you ever end that argument between those two people?
You can't, like,
right.
And that's the whole thing. That's like really where I just come from. I'm just like, everybody just like, shut the fuck up. Like, nobody, you know what I mean? Like, nobody knows that anything is right. So like, just respect each other. That's where I come from. I respect what everybody has to say. You respect what I got to say. We're good. I don't got to try to sway you in one way. You don't got to try to sway me one way. We don't know. It's the unknown. Just live in the unknown.
Yeah. If we're all guessing, just guess the least harmful version.
Exactly. And like, that is what faith is. Like literally, faith is not fact. And that's what drives me insane, because literally, like, the definition of faith is believing in something that has no evidence. Like, no, you cannot see it concrete, but you just believe it. And that is what faith is. So like, to anybody who thinks that like they are right, like, shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? You don't know you're right. You don't know you're right. Respectfully. Like, let's be respectful about this. But yeah, and I love what you said really quick, because I didn't touch on it. But you said long-winded answers. I love that. I was just talking to somebody at work the other day, because like there was this we had heard rumors that we were going to be like working on Saturdays because of like the Christmas push or whatever. And so, this guy, they had a guy from HR come out onto the floor, and they're like, no, guys, he gave us a 45-minute speech. No, guys, Saturdays, that's just a rumor, yada, yada, yada. Went on 45 minutes talking in a literal circle, just saying that in different ways over and over again for 45 minutes. 45 minutes. And guess what happened? You know what I mean? So It's like, to anybody out there who has this long-winded argument, please shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't know. Like, just live in the unknown. None of us know. We're all just making the best guesses that we can.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
Absolutely. And do you guys think, and this is a question for both of you, do you think that somebody can be non-religious, but especially in this country, politically conservative, like very conservative, or very religious and also liberal? Do you think that's possible?
My mom's very liberal, but like she used to hate gay people.
Do you think she would still be liberal if you came out of the closet? Because I've noticed that changes.
So are we still integrating Christianity with the political standpoint?
Yeah, like if she's like a liberal but she's Christian, do you think she would still be liberal if the liberal beliefs she has like applies to her direct family?
Yeah, probably at the point she is now, she would be covertly disappointed. She wouldn't say anything because she's reached that like elder mentality where it's like, well, you're grown. But I know deep down inside it's like she would be like, oh my God, my son's going to hell. This is wrong, both from a political standpoint and religion. This is wrong. But she would never tell me.
Yeah.
And so many people are like that.
And do you think it's possible for somebody to be entirely like atheist and also very politically conservative?
Yeah, I was at that point for a while. It was I think Jake is low-key conservative. I don't know. I
can tell that you think that I am. I sense that from you.
Why is that? I gotta hear this because you touched on it a little bit in your episode, but I'm curious.
He has said several things to me that I'm just like, bro, like I'm not, I don't think I am who you think I am.
Give me an example.
Well, no, I want you to give me an example of why Jake is conservative because you're the one making the accusation. I want you to say
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, what about, because I don't get
Felix too. I
don't get conservative vibes at all from Jake, but I'm curious, like,
I feel like he has a Dr. Jekyll conservative side to him. Like at a certain point, he's like, okay, in order for me to reach my goals, I may have to stand on this side in a certain scenario. Like if you're in a business meeting, right, and you know that deal is determined by your willingness to be submissive about your views, would you change it, or would you stand your ground and just deal with the consequences of people not agreeing with you from that political standpoint?
Would you though, also, Felix?
No, but I said my answer is yes.
Yeah. And so, Jake, what would you do? Like, well, and I think we need to scope it a little bit, because does bending your beliefs harm anyone in this scenario? Does everybody benefit if you sway your beliefs? Or is there like a class that benefits and a class that doesn't? Like, because the harms matter a lot, I feel like, in that.
Well, outside of who it harms other than yourself, are you still not harming yourself if you lie to yourself? Like,
I think it depends on what you're lying about.
You use the term bend, but
why
should you have to bend it if you truly are like that?
Oh, I thought you said bend. I was saying bend because I thought you said bend.
Right. So basically the question here is, would I bend what I believe just so like I can calm everybody down in the room? Is that what you're asking?
Not religion wise, political wise.
Political wise? Bro, I think I said it in the podcast that we were in. Like, I really don't keep up with politics because at the end of the day, I truly believe that all politicians, not all, actually, let me stop. I truly believe that most politicians only care about their personal gain. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, like, I really think that like politicians, the people who are placed in power, are really just people who are corrupt. That's how I feel. So like I really don't follow politics like that, because why would I care and invest my time and energy into people who don't have my best interests at heart?
Right.
So I truthfully am, I'm not conservative. Like,
I
bro,
remember that too.
And like
I remember that part.
you have made, bro, like I'll be candid and honest with you at this point. Like I like speaking to you, Felix. I love talking to you, bro, but like you make my pits sweat, bro, because like I'm like, this man thinks that I'm something that I'm not, and I can tell. I don't know how I can tell, but I can tell.
How can
and
you tell?
I'm not conservative.
I think everybody's kind of conservative.
Maybe to an extent, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think to say that nobody is, so I don't believe that anybody is entirely liberal or entirely conservative, because I have gotten a lot of people in rooms, both via Zoom or literal physical rooms. Lots of people do that. Lots of people pick the side that represents most of what they believe, but not all of what they believe, because we don't yet have a label that quite, like, now you can say centrist. I feel like centrist is a huge word now. It really wasn't before 2016. I feel like it was like forced out of us. Like we had the independent party, but even as a kid, I knew that wasn't really independent. That just meant like we don't really fit. So like, I think if anyone were to tell you that they don't have conservative values, they are lying. And if anyone were to tell you they don't have any liberal values, I think they're lying. But very much like being religious, I think some people just know what'll get them out of the conversation a lot faster. So like, I pretend to be religious all the time. Every time I go home, I pretend to be religious. I gave the prayer at Thanksgiving. It does me no harm to just for that moment be like, for the sake of dinner and not ruining this holiday, I'm going to just do what I've done for the last 25 years, before I changed my mind. No harm. I will not bend politically. Before 2016, probably would have for the sake of a conversation. But now that there is such a huge emphasis on homosexuals' rights, lots of women's rights, lots of things involving like how we treat poor people, how we treat people of color, how we treat people who aren't religious, I wouldn't in a room pretend to be conservative if I'm not conservative. Now, would I start a fight? No. But if somebody turned and made some joke like, well, got to be careful, Sid's the lib here, I wouldn't be like, no. I'd be like, yeah, I am. And if you don't mind, I have some questions for you guys. It's very interesting. Before 2016, I would have never pretended to be an atheist if I was in a group of atheists. And I would have definitely pretended to be whatever political party I had to be to just like not get yelled at the holidays. But it's totally changed now. And that's why I was saying like the definition matters, because if I'm at work and I don't agree with what's going on, but nobody's harmed in the process and I just need to let it go, fine, I'll pretend like I support what management is doing, because at the end of the day, I just want to get out of this conversation and out of this meeting. But if the company's like, on all of our social media, we are now Republican, like we're gonna advertise ourselves as like conservative Republicans from now on, I'm gonna be like, I need to find a different job. I'm not gonna run your social media anymore. I'm so sorry. You need to find somebody else who will do that. Or every day we're gonna pray, I'm gonna be like, then I'll come in at 8:30. Like I'll see you guys, So
to take what Sydney said, Jake, would you do the prayer at the dinner?
That's funny that you mentioned it, because I actually got asked to do the prayer and I was like, I told my mom, I was like, you can lead it. So yeah. And then like also my dad texted me, because it's funny that I was talking about how like I've gotten annoyed when my parents are like, I'm worried about your spiritual journey and I'm scared of where you'll end up or whatever. Like my dad texted me that like just last month maybe. And like I literally like listed him like 2 pages, like I could send you screenshots, bro. Like I sent him like 2 pages of like, this is, these are the principles that I believe in. And like, we can agree to disagree. If you don't believe them, I don't have to believe what you believe. You don't have to believe what I believe. And my dad said, can you call me so we can continue this conversation? I was just like, respectfully, no.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get anywhere with somebody who's trying to, throw their ideal at you. You know what I mean? I literally tried to cut it off there and just be like, we can agree to disagree if you don't believe with these things, but you asked me what I believe in, so here it is. This is what I believe. Yeah. So yeah, like I've been very uncomfortable in the past, like talking about the things that I truly believe deep down, because it's so like taboo, and especially with my family, you know what I mean? Because like people are like, I've been called a wanderer, and oh, you're lost, and oh, you know what I mean? I've been called those things, and it's like, bro, like, no, like I actually just, think for myself and ask myself questions, and I'd advise everybody to do the same, like just ask yourself why you believe the things you believe in, and then you'll find what you actually believe in. It's that simple. And like I am slowly but surely stepping into my own of just like, like this is what I believe in. I'm sorry if this rubs you the wrong way or whatever, but like I would like to agree to disagree and continue to like have a relationship with people. But if you're one of those people who are like, oh, you don't believe what I believe in, blocked. Oh, you're out of my life. Like if you're one of those people, bye. I don't want you in my life anyway.
Right.
Like, let's just respectfully talk about like each other's things, and like it's dope to be different. If everybody was here being the same, that's fucking communism and weird, like that. And that's literally what I feel like this shit is, like what fucking democracy is set up in our minds to be. And like literally, like low key, we have all these fucking conditioning factors that's actually making us fucking have communist principles, because everybody's like, we have to all align on this thin line, and anybody who strays away from this line, like, bro, that's like communism. That's like trying to make everybody the same. So like
segmented.
So it's just like,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, I'm done. I'm honestly done.
I was just gonna say, like, and what a lot of people don't realize is that like that exact same everybody needs to fall in line and do the same thing, it doesn't just apply to religions. It doesn't just apply to conservatives. I don't know if you guys have ever tried, you guys have not tried to be a woman talking to other feminists, but that same brain function, it even applies to people who claim that they're like liberal. Like, I don't know how many times I have been told that I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to like women's rights and like feminism. Like you can agree with somebody and they still don't think you agree enough for the sake of being better, right? Like when you call yourself a liberal feminist and the like better liberal feminists come for you and they're like, oh, well, you think this, so you're wrong. Like you're not one of us. It's this weird, I feel like no matter what group, if you give yourself a label of any kind, whether it's atheist or religious or Christian or liberal or conservative, there will always be those outliers. Hopefully not many of them, but there will always be those outliers who insist that you're actually not one of them because you're not that good enough. Like you don't understand the experience enough. Like, oh, I don't believe in God. Like, well, I actually believe even less in God because this. Like, I'm a feminist. Oh yeah, well, did you march on this day and did you do that on this day? Well, then you're not one of us. It's just so weird. And so when I talk about things like religion making people fall in line and making people follow the rules, I like to emphasize that like you can get caught in that exact same behavior and that exact same fishbowl no matter what group you're in. If you do CrossFit, there's going to be other CrossFitters who challenge whether or not you are a true CrossFitter, right? If you're a runner, if you're a vegan, if you do anything that's like a label that sets you apart from other people, there will always be that small group that's like,
how many bubbles do you think you're a part of?
A lot. Like I consider myself liberal, but I don't consider myself far left. I definitely think I'm more of like a centrist, but more like, so like if the line is here and we've got like liberals on one knuckle, conservatives on one, centrists in the other, I'm probably like the second knuckle. And for people listening to this, they're like, I can't see that. I don't know what she's talking about. I mean, we fall into a million categories,
Are you heterosexual?
Yep. I'm heterosexual. I'm a white Caucasian American woman. I'm a former Christian. I'm an atheist. I'm a leftist. I'm a millennial. I'm an elder millennial. I'm I fall into a million. I fall into we could go on all day about the circles that we fit in, right? I'm a Southerner. We could go on all day. I'm a ginger. There's that too. But I don't think that fits. I don't think that fits any circle. I think we just are out in the abyss.
So do you know what it's like have you ever been in a point in your life where you're just not in any bubble?
I like to think that that's right now, but that's not true. Like mentally, I don't feel like I'm in any bubble because I feel like once you put yourself in a bubble, again, you like open yourself up to having to prove you're bubbly enough in that bubble. Mm-hmm. But it's very much like are we individualists? If we're
Mhm.
honest with ourselves, even if you say I'm in no bubble, you are now in a bubble of everybody who thinks that they don't fit in a bubble.
Mhm.
So just by existing, the day you were born, you were categorized into a million bubbles, right?
So
You're a Sagittarius.
do you believe you're 1 or 9? I counted 9. Do you
I
believe?
believe I'm like 7,000. I believe there's bubbles I
Okay.
fit into that somebody who has my info at Google knows that I fit into that I don't even know that I fit into, you know? Like everybody's a statistic. Everybody's a group, whether they want to or not.
This
When
is
I was
gonna.
a kid, I was
I was
going to
about
say when
to.
I was a kid, like I worked my ass off not to be in any bubble, but that again
Mhm.
put me in the bubble of kid who doesn't want to be in any bubble.
Jake, how many bubbles?
I kind of agree with Sydney, actually. Like, I feel like, I mean, to the consensus, to, you know, you could put me in this bubble and that bubble. Like, I feel like ultimately, like, what I would like is like for everybody to shut the fuck up and just be like one human race, if that makes sense. I
That
don't
made
know.
perfect sense. Yeah.
Right. Like when we talked about, I took the soundbite from our podcast about like people marginalizing themselves. I think that all that does is just fucking like give people reason to
Control you.
destroy themselves and divide themselves. But like literally, if like people were just like, hey, like we're all just one species, like we're just trying to survive as a species, like, you know,
Yeah.
why can't we do that? Like why is it that I have to be this and that in order to get along with people? Like why can't we all just be like human fucking beings? You know what I
Right.
mean? Why can't we all just be like, oh yeah, like when I cut you and you cut me, we bleed the same blood, we got the same skeleton, we got the same nervous system. Like I don't know, that's just kind of like
So
how
you're
I
one
try to
bubble.
be. You said what?
You're one bubble.
One bubble, sure. Yeah.
I'm one bubble too, and that makes me feel crazy.
What's
Doesn't
your
it?
one bubble?
Doesn't it?
You have to battle all of these other bubbles, all of these different domains, and it's like they're all attacking you, saying, "Choose one of us, join one of us, be a part of many of them." And it's like, well, why can't I just be a fucking person with free will?
Yep.
Right? We can argue that it don't even exist if you want to go on that conversation, but
I mean, I truly don't believe free will exists.
yeah, me neither.
I wish it did. Just like I wish heaven existed if it's as great as everybody says. But I truly don't believe free will exists.
Do you believe
Because
people are made up of, and I said this in one of my videos, I want to see what she thinks. Do you believe that we are made up of biochemical algorithms that have already predetermined what we're going to do before we do it?
Yep. Or at least predisposed us to do them. I think chance is still real. So
Mhm.
like, for example, if you're born with the chance to have a certain birth defect, you're not 100% of the time always going to have that birth defect, but you can still be born with that chance and you can still be born with that predisposition. And so, yeah, like as much as I like to think that everything that I like about myself is unique and original, I'm also aware that it's a combination of biochemicals and experiences that those biochemicals drew me to have. Like you don't get to pick what your talents are. You get to pick whether or not you explore them, but you don't get to pick what they are. You don't get to pick that you have like maybe you're better at math than English. Now you can practice and you can try really hard and you can get better at things. But again, the genetics that make you up determine whether or not you're going to have the kind of attitude that makes you want to get better at it or makes you want to just leave it behind and say fuck it. Like I was not born to be a good let's see, I suck at basketball and football. I suck at them. Now the same drive that makes me want to be better at a lot of different things could have made me want to be better at basketball, but it didn't. I don't give a shit about it. You know, I'm not over here sulking about the fact that I'm like 5'1" and I'm never going to be good at basketball. But at the same time, I don't take credit for the interest that I did pursue because I'm literally just doing what my brain wanted to do and what my body had the capabilities of doing, if that makes sense.
Okay. And I'm not going to speak for Jake, but I believe in biochemical algorithms too. And I believe that we're controlled by them.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping that in mind, would any of you trust one single entity with the ability to create one singular algorithm that can solve all of this? this whole conversation that we're having about this one centralized force being righteous or not, do you trust an entity with the ability to create that, to fix everybody's problems?
Jake, you can go first.
I don't think that's fair to cast that on one singular being.
Mhm.
I think that there's multiple different outcomes that, if that even exists, if there are multiple beings even. But yeah, I guess I don't believe in one singular being solving everything.
Mhm.
I would
but
believe them, but I wouldn't trust them. If that makes sense.
get that.
Like if God came down and he was like, hello, I'm God. I developed 1,000 kinds of people. There are only 1,000, and you fall into one of these 1,000 types of people, and I repeat the same 1,000 types. That's why you feel like you live around a bunch of different people, but you actually don't. It's only 1,000. It's been copied and pasted a million times. Here's why I did it. I would believe him, but I wouldn't trust him. I'd be like, that's really shitty that you made people that could still get cancer, or you made people that would still grow up poor or destitute or have, brain misdevelopments that would give them mental illnesses they can't control. I wouldn't trust them, but I'd be like, okay, you showed me who you are. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the algorithm point I'm trying to make is we have to trust somebody one day. Each religion was made, well, not each one, but most of the popular ones was made off the basis of this prophetic being the one and only, the all-knowing, and he was going to lead the people to the righteous world. We need somebody like that today, but we need to make sure we trust them.
Do we need somebody like that though? Or do we need to do a better job of like relying on each other and trusting each other and depending on each other? And like, I think groupthink is more important than leadership. Mm-hmm. I think if the groupthink is solid, and if the village does a great job of depending on one another, listening to one another, taking each other's needs, I think they could do a great job of electing someone who represents those ideas. Mm-hmm. But I think leadership is actually what got us where we are, as opposed to our going back to the village mentality and helping each other and relying on one another and encouraging one another, if that makes sense.
I think we've been given a false sense of choice to an extent, because I think that, our political system says you have a choice, but here's this person and this person, and you have choice, but it's between two people that represent two different ideals that like are pretty outdated, truthfully.
Yeah.
And so if you allowed people, like if we can supposedly elect officials, why can't we elect the laws and principles that we have in place as a country? Like, why can't we choose that? Why do we have people in place that make these decisions for us that a lot of us don't even want?
Well, because we chose it.
Did we?
But did we though? Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Did we choose that? Like, did we choose the abortion? Just, like the abortion law or whatever that just, happened in several states. There was a huge uproar about it, but it's like, why, clearly people are upset about it, but like, did people even have a say in that? And like, I'm not even gonna go too deep into that, because I as a man who does not have a uterus, I cannot speak on that, and that's not right for me to speak on that. But all I'm trying to say is, like, why isn't there a reason that why can't we have more of a say of the laws put in place, and why do we have people that insist that this is best for us?
Right.
And when you say
I think
people, who do you mean?
Everybody, like Americans, if you want to marginalize it. Like, why do, like, and that would be with any group of people. Like, why are there people in power who, I don't know, why are there people in power who just freely make these decisions for us without really letting us truly help them make that decision?
Yeah. I think also this, and people say, well, you elect your representatives, right? Like the people in Washington represent you, but they don't, because somebody still lost, right? I think it would be helpful if we had more representatives. I think it would be helpful if, say, for example, instead of taking the person to Washington who got the most votes, we took the top 3 people to Washington to represent us. I think you would find a lot more representation there. I think that's like huge. I think having multiple parties would be huge. And people say all the time, like, but we have the Green Party, but we really don't. Like, at the end of the day, you still have to pick one, right, on the ballot. And I think we also need to cycle those people out, those representatives out, much more often than we do. Because right now what we're running into is the representatives in Washington were voted in by people whose opinions were relevant about 20 years ago, maybe, right? And when some of these jobs have lifelong terms, that's preposterous. Like, why would you want somebody speaking for you who was voted in the 60s? Like, that's not what I want. In fact, whoever I voted for when I was in college, I don't vote for them anymore. So I'm glad that the person who I picked as president when I was 21 didn't become president and isn't president, because I no longer, I've grown, I've changed, I've done research, I've developed my own thoughts and opinions. So even if you're like, yeah, in 1960, I voted that guy into office, you could look at it now and be like, I was a dumb fuck. I don't agree with any of that. And like we were saying earlier, when there's only 2 parties, you have to sacrifice a lot of what it is you actually believe in order to pick a side and put that vote on that ballot. Now, if you had 6 or 8 people to choose from, there's a high likelihood that you would find somebody who was much more whittled down to what you actually believe in. Like, oh, they're conservative, right? They're fiscally conservative, but they also think it should be a woman's choice, but they also think, et cetera, et cetera. Like, they're not a Baptist. They weren't raised Baptist, but they are more conservative. Maybe they think that you should have guns, but they think they should be a lot harder to get. Instead of being like, no guns versus guns, it's like, oh, well, this person says that they agree that you should have them, but there should be like mental health checks. They also think that mental health should be more affordable. And they think that you should charge churches tax money, or like billionaires should pay more. Like, you can fine tune it a lot more when you have more options. But when it's like, no, you got to pick one, you got to pick the cheese pizza or the pepperoni pizza. It's like, y'all don't have anything with mushroom. Like, I love mushroom. Nobody even asked me about mushroom. Yeah.
Right.
And now this guy's in Washington, pepperoni's up here saying, yeah, and fucking ban mushroom too, because that's what my people voted. And his people are like, you didn't even ask us. Like, this wasn't on the ballot when we voted for you. If I had known that that's how you felt about an issue that wasn't an issue back then on the ballot, I wouldn't have voted for you.
Do you believe we live in a democracy still, or do we live in a plutocracy?
I think the word democracy and the definition of democracy needs to be revisited. I think we technically live in a democracy, but I think things have escalated to a point where they're really, in this country, in this particular country, that just doesn't work anymore. Like, we've already proven we can't have nice things, we are irresponsible with those things. So while technically, yes, I don't think it operates the way that it was supposed to when it was first presented as a democratic society.
I don't even believe in politics, not because I just want to be one of those dudes that's like, I just don't vote. But it's like, my vote doesn't matter, because if I did vote, just know I was manipulated before I submitted it. And I was manipulated by the same companies that controlled the 2016 election with misinformation. And my problem with misinformation is, I don't believe it's a people's problem. I don't believe it's a problem with democracy. I don't believe it's a problem with the politicians. It's a problem with the companies that we have put in literal control of our lives. We are doing this on Zoom.
Yep.
What are they doing with our data right now? How is this going to determine how I vote in 4 years?
Right. Yeah. Like, I don't assume that I'm not being watched all the time.
Are they going to listen to this conversation and then put this in an ad campaign and then promote it to people that fall under the same bubble as we do? We don't know, because we just hit the acknowledgement button and kept going about our day.
Yeah. Well, probably not this one, because they hate my eyebrows, apparently. That's what I get insulted on the most, is your eyebrows are too. Yeah. But they'll probably use your clips for sure. But
They
Yeah,
just pocket, they give money to our politicians, and then we tell ourselves that we stand for something. And then whatever we stand on is supported by these people that are our leaders, but our leaders are being paid off by these billionaires
right.
that control the world. And it's like, there's really no point. You don't even know what you're voting for, because the person that's representing you don't even know what they're supporting until they have the
Right.
funds to do it.
But at the same time, I approach voting the exact same way that I approach how I do or do not act religiously. And I've heard this exact same argument from religious people. I would rather vote every single time and find out that it did not matter at all and it was just thrown in the trash. I would sleep better at night than never vote and find out that maybe my vote could have counted. The same way as I would rather be an atheist and go based on my thoughts and my feelings and my research and what people I've spoken to and interviews that I've done and books that I've read. I would rather apply that and find out it was all for nothing, because either A, we're all going to hell because none of us are following the original faith or whatever, than do the fake stuff my whole life and find out that the harmful version was also wrong, right? Like I believe that, gay people deserve rights. I believe that everybody should have the right to vote and to own homes and to own cars and to dress however they want and to have sex before marriage and to do whatever it is they want. And that's truly what I believe. But I would rather find out that all of that was for nothing than do the opposite and harm people mentally and emotionally and deprive myself of experiences and individuals I could have been friends with because of their sexuality and things like that for nothing. If one of them is going to be for nothing, I'd rather have done what I thought was the right thing at the time, if that makes sense. And I've heard Christians say the same thing. I've heard them say, I would rather, get baptized and go to church and read the Bible and find out all that was nothing. It didn't matter. But I thought votes didn't really matter before, until this election, when they tried as hard as they could to not let me vote in the state of Tennessee. Then I started to realize, actually, maybe votes do matter, at least on a local level, because both me and my partner, we're liberals. We came here from Chicago. Our IDs don't say Tennessee. We are very clearly, like, when you see us walk into a room, there's like no mistaking where we lie politically. And they tried a bunch of stuff. It actually made it the news with how hard Tennessee tried to make it for liberals who have recently moved here to vote in the most recent election. And he actually didn't even end up getting to vote because they made it so difficult to jump through so many hoops. So now I'm like, maybe our votes do matter. And they're actually trying to convince us that they don't matter so that the people they don't want to vote won't vote. Right? It's like meta. It's very conspiracy theory, but maybe they've been touting all this, your vote doesn't matter, so that our generations, the more statistically liberal leaning generations, won't vote, so that they can continue to have the older generations vote and get what they want, and the more conservatives vote and keep things the way that they always were. And if all I have to do is vote, and it either could be useless or I could find out that I'm accidentally like sticking it to the man, either way, like, I'll just go down the street and vote, right?
I feel that. I like how you laid out the conspiracy theory there and the layers and all that, because it's just like, for me, like with presidential elections, it's just like, if it's not, like you said, like them making it hard for people to vote, or, like people losing votes, and stuff of that nature, it can still go to the electoral college and votes can be overridden.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So it's like, does my vote matter? That is what I like. I hope as I get older, maybe my perspective can change, and maybe I'll be like, you know what, maybe my vote does actually matter, and let me go vote and make a difference. But my feelings and like what I've seen and noticed has just like not felt right about that. Intuitively, that's just how I feel. But like I said, I'm open to learning more about it, and maybe one day I will be swayed and I'll be like, okay, yeah, like my vote actually does matter, let me go vote.
Yeah, Yeah. And again, like, I don't pretend to be correct about any of this. I could find out that actually none of it mattered. And there's a whole third thing going on that's a bunch of bullshit, that we weren't even prepared for, that isn't even part of this conspiracy theory. But I think as long as we are taking action towards what we believe, even if it's getting knocked out, even if it's getting canceled out, even if it's getting, it's not making it to the top, whether that's Washington, whether that's religious based, whether like Christians keep making all the laws, even when we don't want that to be the case, at least we maybe can sleep a little bit better at night knowing that we did what we could. And at a certain point where we no longer had control, that's where we gave up, or that's where we lost out, if that makes sense. Because I mean, if you think about it, any of the major social changes that have ever happened because people stuck their neck out and were like, nah, I'm not cool sitting back with this happening, right? And I think a lot of people probably went to the Women's March thinking, this doesn't matter, it's not going to change. They're going to, throw us all in jail for being here, but at least I was here, right? At least I tried. And then here we are, decades later, and I can vote and I can have a bank account, which I couldn't have until the 70s. Like, that's pretty cool. But like, I'm glad that their votes eventually did matter. I know there's a lot of people who are mad about that still. Like, we haven't changed that much as a society, but when you think about it, it's like the same thing with even social trends or fashion trends. Somebody was like, I don't want sleeves on this shirt anymore. And somebody else was like, I don't know, man, I feel like the Bible wants you to wear sleeves. And they're like, so what? It's hot. And then we had the tank top, and now millions of people are wearing tank tops, and now you can wear a tank top in church and nobody's going to say anything. They might behind your back, but like, they won't to your face. They can't kick you out, So like, on a small scale or on a big scale, I at least want to be able to sleep well at night knowing that I did what I could. And if I didn't make what I wanted happen, or what I feel is best for people happen, at least I did my part, as opposed to always wondering what if, because what if kills me. Even on a small scale. It's like, what if I had bought that thing? What if I had asked that guy out? What if I had gone on that trip? What if I had turned right instead of left there? Like, that kills me. So I think that's why I make so many like crazy decisions, like off the wall, because I never want to live with the what if. I'd rather live with the consequences of my actions than always wondering what could have been. I mean, what do you guys think about that? Like, are you risk takers? Does what if bother you?
Go ahead, Felix.
No. I feel like I'm dead if I don't take a risk every day. Just living on its own is a risk. When I go out and get into my car, I have a high chance of dying. I could get on a plane and be safer. I can go with a business venture that has a 50% chance of failing, but fuck it, like, why not just do it? I'm gonna die anyway.
YOLO. Yeah.
Young Thug was like, horses don't stop, they keep going. He probably said hustlers, but I know he said horses.
Something like that. Yeah. It sounds like horses. Yeah.
Yeah, we going with horses.
Horses.
Keep
Yeah.
going, bro. There's no point of holding back in whatever you want to do. So I'm like, just fucking do it. If you want to vote, go vote. If you don't want to vote, don't vote.
And then don't complain to me about who wins.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my main thing, is I'm like, hey, that's cool if you don't want to vote. Just don't like bitch to me about who the president is. It's because you didn't vote, I will say though, Felix, you seem very like even keeled about most things, about like your opinions, your thoughts, your decisions. You seem very like solid in them. You don't seem like you think you know it all, but you seem like you don't question, or you don't view a lot of your actions to be like mistakes later. What is something that worries you or freaks you out or concerns you? Like, if you reached any level of concern at all, even if it's just a little bit, what would that be?
I hope my mental health is not being destroyed in the process of trying to figure this life shit out. And in my family, like, I have a history of like mental illness, so I don't think they've ever gotten to the point that I've gotten to with my thoughts. They've cracked out before then, but like, I often think like, am I going crazy in the process of believing what I believe? Because you probably know, when you talk to people about how you truly feel about something, it's that look in their eyes they give you that makes you feel like whatever you're doing is like abstract to what you're supposed to be doing. It's like, how do you not go crazy in the process? So I often think about that. That's one of my concerns. But other than that, it's a gift too, because I don't really concern myself with anything but that. Because if I have a consequence, I'm like, well, fuck, I did it to myself.
Yeah. Have you ever made a big mistake that you were like, oof, like that actually did turn out worse than I thought the negative consequence could be for that action?
No, I watch people make mistakes before and I learn from them. And so I don't make the same mistakes they do.
Yeah, that's really good. And then what about you, Jake? Like because you also seem pretty like where Felix is very like stoic and like kind of serious. I feel like you're very like, hey, like life is what it is. You've got good vibes. You seem like a very chill guy. You said you want everybody to just get along and kind of like be one group. What is something that worries somebody like you?
Something that worries somebody like me. I think I really don't care like what anybody does or what anybody chooses to do, as long as it's not harming anybody else, is really where I'm at. So it's like any decision that I make, I agree with y'all. It's like, fuck it, might as well do it. It's not hurting anybody, right? And that's kind of the only like corrector in my mind, is that if it is harming somebody, if it has direct intent to hurt a person, I'm not going to do it. But if it's not, and it's, and it's something that I want to do, I'm going to do it. And yeah, that's just kind of how I try to live my life. I try to, live it for myself within reason of not harming other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's a good way to live your life for sure. So I know that we've come to the end of our time that I told you this would take. I don't want to take your whole evenings away, but if we had to end with a message that you wanted to give somebody who maybe they grew up religious and they're not sure how they feel, or maybe they already know they're not religious, but they're not really sure where to go from there. They're not sure what they think politically, socially, they're just lost. What would each of you say individually to somebody who might need some guidance in terms of who to be or where to go?
I don't think anybody's truly lost. I think the idea that somebody is lost comes from other people's perspectives and their values. And I think everybody should just live life according to like how, they feel, like instinct, truthfully, like live life how you want to live it. And if it's harming other people, probably make some changes there if it's harming other people. But if it's not harming anybody else, like do live life how you want to live it, because like you're not gonna be on your deathbed like wishing that you had like conformed your beliefs for somebody else, or you censored yourself to fit in with other people or whatever. Like just live life how you want it. It's yours.
Excellent. And Felix?
With me, it's like, and this may be biased, but I personally believe everybody should, don't do this literally, but I believe people should mentally kill everybody in their mind. Kill every experience that you think has shaped who you think you are. Kill every belief. And when you get to the moment where you are near the darkness and you think the only thing that exists is you, whatever that first thought is that comes to your mind, and you're like, that's who I am, you should run with that and then live based on that for the rest of your life. And you'll get to that, what they call self-actualization point.
So you're saying don't worry about what other people are telling you or what your like society or rules are telling you. Focus more on what your brain is telling you want to try, or you want to be like, or you want to believe.
Unless you're like Jeffrey Dahmer or something.
Yeah. Unless it harms. Yeah. At the point where it harms anybody else, I think we all agree. At the part where you harm anyone else, that's where it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, this has been delightful. I've really enjoyed talking to you. It's been very strange talking to you after watching your video because I watched it like 3 times, like talking to you in person, or I guess via Zoom. Very interesting. It's like watching the video responding back to me. But I really appreciate your time. I'm going to link the original video that we referenced in this interview in the show notes so that people can check it out so they can kind of get more context on what we're talking about. I appreciate your honesty and your experience and your willingness to put those thoughts out there, both on your private channels as well as on each other's channels and on my channel. And I wish you all the best. And I hope you guys have a fantastic 2023.
Yeah.
Thank you. You too.
For having you too.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. See ya. Bye.
Bye.